Let's go back to that moment in 1939, though, when The Spy in Black had just been released. A month later, Britain was once again at war with Germany. And within 6 weeks, a German U-boat had torpedoed an elderly British battleship at Scapa Flow. Events were making Powell's and Pressburger's film seem almost too topical. And the idea of its hero being a German submarine commander still seems unlikely, even if the setting was World War I. But all of the films that they would make together in the following 7 years took an oblique, sometimes eccentric, but always topical view of what the war was about and what lessons Britain needed to learn if it was to successfully fight the war. They were certainly propaganda, but of an unusually intelligent kind, which is why they remain fascinating for audiences many years later. So how did Powell and Pressburger manage to work together in the early years of the war? Well, this wasn't due to support from either Alexander Korda or even Arthur Rank at first. The actual production of the early films they made together is much more complex and less well known. It was initially through sheer ambition and audacity. I think we've jumped ahead a little bit there. Those are the films that they would make together during the 7 years that I was talking about. Let's just go to this slide. A Ministry of Information had been created at the beginning of war, and improbably the art historian Kenneth Clark was briefly at the head of its films division. That's Kenneth Clark showing members of the royal family around the National Gallery. He was a very young director of the National Gallery, and I suppose somebody in Whitehall probably thought, pictures, he must know about pictures, so he became head of the films division. He didn't actually know anything about pictures in that sense, but he did know talent when he saw it. And Michael Powell had the brilliant idea of going to the Ministry of Information and asking them if they would back a proposal to make a film set in Canada, which is the film that you're going to have a chance to see later this evening. It's the result of initial funding, seed funding, as we would say today, by the Ministry of Information, which allowed Powell, Pressburger, and a small team to travel to Canada, to travel right across Canada, to understand something about the checkerboard pattern of communities from many different backgrounds. That was the main thing that they took away from their experience of Canada, and of course the immensely varied landscape. They were very excited by what they saw, and they started work on a script. Emmerich Pressburger would win his only Oscar, in fact, for the script that he wrote for the film. The film is known in North America as The Invaders, which is perhaps more direct. And there you see a poster for it, a rather catchpenny poster, which gives a totally misleading impression of what Glynis Johns and Laurence Olivier are doing in the film. They don't, in fact, appear in the same sequence at all. But, you know, you've got to sell a film. That photograph in the middle is Laurence Olivier watching rushes of the film with Vivien Leigh, because, of course, Olivier had become a very big celebrity because of his, elopement, in effect, with Vivien Leigh at this time. But the film is essentially a film about the terrain, the landscape of Canada. And the 49th parallel is the dotted line that separates Canada from America. It includes, very interestingly and very importantly, a lot of material about Nazi Germany. It includes a German newsreel, for instance. It includes a very clear and straightforward presentation of what members of the Nazi Party believed and what they were willing to produce as exhortation when they felt they were in like-minded company. Alexander Korda, I have to say, was working on the same project. And let me just show you. At the same time, he also was trying to make a film that would advance Britain's case. His solution was to take Olivier and Vivien Leigh to Hollywood and to make a film called That Hamilton Lady, which is a film about Nelson, Britain's official greatest hero, and how Nelson faced the threat of an earlier continental dictator in the shape of Napoleon. And that film was successful too, but Corder was nearly prosecuted in America for making propaganda in favor of America entering the war. It was a risky business. 49th Parallel walked a different path by saying, look, it can happen to Canada, surely it could happen to America. But most of all, I want to show you an extract from the film, most of all it gave Pressburger and Powell a chance to put in front of an audience what Nazism stood for and how it could be countered not only by Democrats, Canadians, but also even by Germans or people from German-speaking background. So this is the great scene where the little band of refugees from the U-boat that has been blown up, because this also starts with a U-boat, how they assume they're among friends when they go to the Hutterite community in Canada.
Sorry, I'm late, Peter. Barbarina, there's an electric storm playing all around us, frightening the animals and your chickens. Move over, Philip. What about you, Anna?
Andreas, one of our guests is speaking.
Eh? What? Oh, good.
We were discussing the Habermans.
I was about to say, you have one clear choice. Where there is a question of blood, where one is governed by the deepest of racial instincts, then every other consideration is swept aside. Men like yourself, German or of German ancestry, rise up with all the might and power of the great German people behind you, conscious of the sacred duty that binds us all together, and in the knowledge that he who does not forget his people will not by his people be forgotten. There is a new wind blowing from the east, a great storm coming across the sea, a hurricane which will sweep aside all the old outmoded ways of life and mark the beginning of a new order not only for Europe, but for the whole world. Let those beware who would have the temerity to stand in its way. They will go down before its irresistible impulse and be crushed out of existence. But for those who accept the new order, for those who perhaps belong to it already, why need I use these parables of speech any longer? I mean all of you here tonight. Yes, you, brothers! I call you brothers and proudly acknowledge you as such. You who form the little stronghold of our people here in Canada, you will have your share of the happiness and prosperity that is waiting for us all. When the storm is over and the sun rises, that mighty sun, which will give us everything we need in life.
What sun are you talking about, friend?
I am talking of the greatest idea in history. The supremacy of the Nordic race, the German people. I am talking of the being whose name I am certain lives in every heart, whose name hangs on all our lips, whether we can shout it to the world or only whisper it in one another's ears. Germans! Brothers! I ask you to join with me in paying homage to our glorious Führer. Heil Hitler!
Heil Hitler!
I don't ask where you come from or what brought you here, although you've left us in no doubt as to your beliefs. Someone has given you, no doubt deliberately, a completely false impression of us. We are only one amongst many foreign settlements in Canada. There are thousands of them in this part of the world, and they've been founded recently, some 80 years ago, by people who left their homes in Europe because of famine, because of starvation, because of racial and political persecution, and some, like ourselves, because of their faith. Some came only to find new land, new boundaries, a new world. But all have found here in Canada the security, peace, and tolerance and understanding which in Europe it is your Führer's pride to have stamped out. You call us Germans. You call us brothers. Yes, most of us are Germans. Our names are German, our tongue is German, our old handwritten books are in German scripts. But we are not your brothers. Our German is dead. However hard this may be for some of us older people, it's a blessing for our children. Our children grow up against new backgrounds, new horizons. And they are free. Free to grow up as children. Free to run and to laugh without being forced into uniforms, without being forced to march up and down the streets singing battle songs. You talk about a new order in Europe. The new order, where there will not be one corner, not a hole big enough for a mouse, where a decent man can breathe freely. You think we hate you, but we don't. It is against our faith to hate. We only hate the power of evil which is spreading over the world. You and your Hitlerism are like the microbes of some filthy disease, filled with a longing to multiply yourselves until you destroy everything healthy in the world. No. We are not your brothers.
Making contact with a new range of actors of remarkable quality was another important gain for Powell and Pressburger through making 49th Parallel. It gave them access to a whole new level of production, which neither of them had ever experienced before. Eric Portman, who plays the Lieutenant Hirt, would remain central to one of their most interesting attempts to penetrate the ideology of Englishness. He's got a central, very difficult part in A Canterbury Tale, playing the initially very unsympathetic figure of the frustrated country's squire who wants to impart his hard-won knowledge to the new pilgrims brought to Canterbury by the war. And of course, another vitally important actor for Powell and Pressburger also made his debut in the film. As you've just seen him, the Viennese actor Anton Walbrook, who had initially come to Britain to play Prince Albert in 2 films about Queen Victoria, 2 Herbert Wilcox films. But with the outbreak of war, he found a new role playing the good German, articulating Powell and Pressburger's determination to explain that not all Germans were Nazis, first as the Hutterite settler in 49th Parallel, as you've just seen, and then as Theo von Kretschmar Schuldorf in The Life and Death of Colonel Blimp, which I'll be discussing in the next session. 49th Parallel turned out to be a supremely well-timed gamble, made on an epic scale across Canada, with many guest star appearances. It launched in October and November 1941, just weeks before the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor precipitated America's entry into the war. And it confirmed Powell and Pressburger's determination to think ahead, to make films that addressed complex future propaganda issues. Michael Powell wrote at one point that a film takes at least a year to make. We have to be thinking at least a year ahead to what audiences might be wanting to see on the screen at the point that we're conceiving a film.